Hey, folks, welcome back to the Carl Zahn Show. This would be episode 8, if I'm counting correctly. Back to a solo act this week. Anyone who has checked out the show knows the last couple episodes we had some former comedians that I worked with in visiting, which was fun, and we will certainly do more of that. Trying to mix it up a little bit and see what folks want out there. And on that note, like and subscribe and share if you like what we're doing here and you want to spread it around. And we want to keep doing it, so we want it to grow a little bit. So spread it around with your friends and feel free to comment, by the way, because I'm always interested in what people think. And as long as you think exactly like I do. I'm always interested to see what people think and what you prefer in terms of guests, no guests, content, and all that sort of stuff. So, all kinds of crazy stuff to talk about this week. I hardly know where to begin. O.J. Simpson has passed away, and that's probably all I'm going to say about that. Maybe he will reunite with his ex-wife, depending on where he's going. I'm not so sure which direction that would be. Tons of interesting stuff going on in the world. First thing I wanted to touch on is anyone who hasn't seen it, you should check out former President Trump was campaigning and did an impromptu visit to a Chick-Fil-A in Georgia. Small group of people in there, mostly African American. And I mean, if you haven't seen it by yet, if you haven't seen it by now, you must be living under a rock or you just don't want to see it. But Trump goes into this place, he orders 30 milkshakes and some chicken sandwiches for everybody, and he's talking to the help behind the counter. And then there's this one young woman there, African American woman, who's obviously quite verbose and gregarious. And she's telling Donald Trump, don't listen to the media, no matter what they say, we're behind you, we're with you. And Trump, in pure Trump form, says, bring her over here, I'm going to give her a hug. And so he goes over, gives this girl a big hug, and you can tell that she is just in seventh heaven. And it was one of those moments that, again, Trump is such a fascinating personality. But as I mentioned on the first show, you know, I had occasion to interview him. I've met him and his family and, you know, not best friends, but I've met him in those certain occasions. And he always struck me like that. Like, he's so charismatic. It's so easy for him. And it's not fake and it's not pretend. And that's one of the things that really fascinated I was fascinated about from the beginning with Donald Trump is how can you be a multi-billionaire? You're literally flying around in this jet with your name plastered on the side in big gold letters. It's like a Saturday Night Live skit. And yet he never comes off as that guy. He never comes off as kind of holier than thou or, I'm super rich and you're not. And then all these other guys that tried to fake it, and like Mitt Romney always comes to mind. And I may have mentioned this in the first program where Mitt Romney coming up to New Hampshire and he's wearing a brand new LL Bean vest and brand new work boots, and he's trying to look like this country New Hampshire guy. But it's so fake, and you can't believe the lack of self-awareness of these people. And Biden has the same thing. Biden has spent his entire career trying to convince everybody that he's Lunchbox Joe. And I always say, look in the lunchbox before you take that, he's a working guy, because something tells me there's not a ham sandwich and Twinkies in Joe's lunchbox, but probably either classified documents or a severed head. So the whole Lunchbox Joe thing, it's so fake. And it just goes to show you that there are some things you cannot fake. It's like comedy. If you watch the last episode or two with some former comedians in here, you can learn how to do comedy and you can learn how to tighten up your act and you can learn how to read a room and you can do stuff like that. But you can't really learn to be a comedian. Like, you can't learn to be funny, just like I can't learn to be an artist or there's God-given gifts that if you're lucky enough to recognize it and expand upon it, then that's the key. But Biden is always trying to fake this regular guy charisma. And you look back at just a week or so ago, a few weeks ago, they arranged something where he went to this black family's house and he brought chicken, fried chicken, which, like, if you or I did that, people would be like, what the hell is wrong with you, I'm going to visit black people. I'll bring fried chicken and a watermelon and a shine box, It's like so utterly pathetic. And it's the typical case of like a guy trying too hard. And then he did it again last week. He went to visit an Italian family and he brought pizza. It's like, God, such a painful moron. So if you haven't seen this thing with Trump at the Georgia Chik-Fil-A, check it out because I just think it's heartwarming. It's so emblematic of Trump. He's not faking it. He actually enjoys people. He actually enjoys that stuff. You even see a couple Secret Service guys cracking a smile, which never happens. So to check that out if you haven't already. Also big in the news this week, this is kind of blowing my mind too. So this guy, Uri Berliner, depending on how you want to pronounce it, he's a 25-year anchor and journalist at NPR. And so he came out last week with this big, I won't call it an expose, but a statement saying that he thinks NPR has gone so far left and full woke, and they don't present any other viewpoints, and they're so slanted to the left, and he thinks, that they're doing themselves a disservice. And so all the mainstream media, especially on the left, but even some conservative channels are like reveling in this, like it's some big revelation. And I don't know, maybe it's me, but NPR has always been completely left that I know of for like 20, 25 years. I don't ever remember listening to NPR where I wasn't completely turned off by the presentation, the lack of wanting to consider any other viewpoints, and also they're so well known for their gravelly voiced, soft-spoken radio people that it's actually been the subject of satire. So it's become this certain kind of broadcast style has become so emblematic of NPR that it actually gets satired. So I don't understand this whole thing with NPR and Uri Berliner making this big. It's like, I don't know. I think most of us already knew that. And the other thing that drives me crazy about them is that they're funded with taxpayer dollars. So they don't have to survive in the media world like most radio stations or broadcast companies do, where you have a product that people want, and therefore people watch. And when people watch, other people advertise, and that's how you make your money. So NPR is completely driven by donations and taxpayer dollars. And of course, their studios and everything. It's the best of everything because they don't have a bottom line like the rest of us do. So NPR is slanted left. Breaking news, I guess. Another, just a great story. These are the things that make me wonder, like how crazy things have to get before the bow breaks. Like before the reasonable, logical people that are out here, and you can sense it with me in this show, and it's kind of what the show is all about, like the pretzel bending logic. I think some of us are ready to snap like a dry twig. I might be one of them. So last week in Canada, and you can always look to Canada and Toronto if you want to foreshadow what's on the horizon for this country. Trudeau, who's got to be one of the biggest pussies on the face of the planet, pardon my language, but please, the guy's just nauseating. If you remember the COVID protests and the truckers, where they shut down the truckers and then they seized their bank accounts, froze their bank accounts, seized their bank accounts, like, government overreach. Are you kidding me? And of course, this is also a country where they don't want anyone to have firearms or personal protection. So last week, the Toronto Police Service put out a statement saying, and a particular officer suggested that to avoid a home invasion where people, so this is becoming a thing now, these home invasions where they want your car. So they break into your home in the middle of the night to ostensibly get your car keys. Not sure how much sense that makes, but it's becoming so prevalent that the Toronto police, rather than increasing patrols or hiring more police officers or putting bad guys in jail, they have suggested to citizens up there that you leave your keys on the front steps. And that way the home invaders, the carjackers, don't have to break into your home in the middle of the night to take your car. So, while I generally love trend setting and outside the box thinking, I'm not sure this falls in that category. But I'm assuming if this is successful, that they will probably advise women who don't want to be raped to, leave your vagina on the front step in a little plastic baggie. Maybe you don't want your home invaded and your jewelry stolen, so just leave your jewelry in a box on the front porch. I don't know. Maybe you don't want your young child molested and sex trafficked, so rather than have someone break into the home and kidnap your child, just leave it on the front step in a basket. Come to think of it, why not just leave everything on the front step? Your car keys, your minor children, your genitals, jewelry, silverware. Trying to think if I'm missing anything. Loose change. I don't know. Anything someone might want in a home invasion, leave it on the front step and you'll be safe. Like I said, when does the bow break with this utter stupidity? I mean, it literally sounds like something from a Saturday Night Live skit, although that's not even a good reference anymore because SNL hasn't been funny for about 20 years at least. This police officer goes on to say, they're breaking into your home to steal your car. They don't want anything else, he said, so it's best to leave your car keys on your front step. He went on to say a lot of these people that we're arresting have guns on them, and they're not toy guns, they're real guns. So again, mind-bending breaking news here, because I thought most home invaders had like a squirt gun or a cap gun with them. I had no idea these people were actually carrying actual firearms. This guy should be tarred and feathered and driven down the streets of Toronto and mocked openly. It's again, like I try to be fair and not be mean and try to be reasonable, but the departure from any sense of logic or common sense here, would you tell any of your kids that? Like, just acquiesce to the criminal. Give them what they want. Don't even give them what they want. Offer it before they even ask for it. Leave your keys on the front step. And you heard it here first. Weeks that will be suggested here. They just had the shooting, the young black kid, and I'm not even sure what city it is. A producer and I were just talking about it on off air. He got pulled over and then he opens fire on the police. And then I guess the police, shot him fatally with multiple rounds. But they're trying to equate this to like another George Floyd thing. And, it's not. It's not a George Floyd thing. And really, the George Floyd thing wasn't even a George Floyd thing. Doesn't matter if you're white or black or what color you are. If you're a fentanyl addict and you're passed out in a Wendy's parking lot and you're violent and you're resisting arrest, I got to tell you, doesn't matter what color you are or ethnicity. You put up that kind of resistance and that kind of BS to any police officer and you're risking your physical well-being, to say the least. Wouldn't be any different for any of us. And again, it just is amazing to me how the left tries to contort everything into a racist act, the white police, the bad cops, all of that. It's like so utterly tiresome. And I just can't believe that anybody buys into it anymore. And yet, you look at the poll numbers right now, it's, Trump's up by a point. It should be 20 points. And it may actually be 20 points because I don't actually trust the poll numbers. I think there's a lot of people who support Trump who won't do it openly and are certainly not going to admit to it to a pollster. So I think the numbers could be way off. But nonetheless, all of that aside, it should be like a 20-point spread. Like regardless of how crazy you think Trump is, you look at what's happening in the world, and as I speak, and it could even be happening right now, we're on the verge of the quagmire in the Middle East becoming a full-blown nightmare. It's almost assured now that Iran is going to launch some kind of massive attack against Israel in retribution for the son of one of their leaders getting killed over there. I mean, it's just such a nightmare. And then you look at the people who are running the show and making the decisions. And I mean, I don't know. You tell me. Do you have confidence? Do you? Would you get on a commercial airliner and glance into the cockpit and see Joe Biden in the captain's seat and continue with the flight? Particularly if it was on a Boeing aircraft? I don't know. I don't think I would. Let's see here. The Toronto police thing, God almighty, I just love it. It's so counterintuitive to everything. So another big thing that happened last week that I wanted to talk about, because I think it has been covered on the news, but I don't think maybe to the depth that it should. So for the first time ever, the parents of a convicted school shooter have been charged and sentenced to 10 years in prison. So you've probably heard of the case. This is in Pontiac, Michigan. Their son killed 4 students. The Oakland County Judge, Cheryl Matthews, said that the convictions are not about poor parenting. The convictions confirm repeated acts or lack of acts that could have halted an oncoming runaway train. Jennifer and James Crumbley said they did not know that their son Ethan had a handgun. That's been called into question as the news story said that they bought him a handgun or knew he had a handgun. He was only 15 years old. But this kid had given a note to his teacher, or the teacher found a note on a piece of school paper where he had drawn the handgun and said on the note, "Please help me, the thoughts won't stop." And then I think he had written on there, "blood everywhere." So the school called the parents in about this note. And the parents, they're not great parents, no question about it. They were incensed that they had to go to this school meeting because it interrupted their afternoon schedule or something. But to me, the bigger issue is, well, there's multiple issues. Why would you call the parents when you should be calling the police or a mental health person? One of the problems in this country, and I know this from friends and family and personal experience, getting help for somebody with a mental disorder or severe depression or anything like that is just about impossible. If that person is over 18, you can't just walk in and say, "Hey, this person needs help." They will tell you, "We can't offer that until they threaten to hurt themselves or someone else." Well, inevitably, by the time they've done that or threatened somebody, they have already hurt themselves or someone else. So it seems crazy to me. Teen suicide and depression is off the hook. This kid, he killed 4 people, and the parents spoke in the courtroom. And you can imagine, and I would be the same way as a parent. They're enraged, and they want him to go away, as he should, and they wanted the parents to go away, and they are, for 10 years. However, and again, not detracting from their righteous grief. However, where does that stop down that slippery slope? Because by that reasoning, you could build somewhat of a case that Joe Biden should be in prison. I mean, he showered with his daughter up until she was 11 or 12 years old. He has a son who had a felony handgun crime. He was a crack addict and bought a gun and lied on his background paperwork. And I know that's kind of an extreme, ridiculous example. We all know Joe and Joe Biden are not going to go to jail. But where does this end now? Let's go into the Chicago neighborhoods. Let's go into the Detroit neighborhoods. Let's go into the, all these beleaguered neighborhoods all over the country, and not just African-American communities, poor white communities. Again, ethnicity is not part of this argument. But where do we stop with that slippery slope? We're going to start convicting parents now for being bad parents? The whole world is full of bad parents. And you actually have to go through more scrutiny to adopt a pet from the Humane Society than you do to father a child or parent a child. There are no rules to getting pregnant. There's no form to fill out. So I think this is a really slippery slope. And again, this is one where we have to kind of look at it and try to separate yourself from the emotion. So it's very easy to look at this and go, yeah, this kid, this son of a bitch, he killed 4 students. And you look at the kid and you tell by looking at him that he's a mess. I feel bad for everyone involved. I feel horribly for the 4 students who got killed. I feel bad for the young man who had parents that clearly didn't care about his suffering. He basically left a note on his desk. Not basically, literally and figuratively left a note on the desk and please help me. Not a cry for help. It's not a sublime, read between the lines. It's an outward cry for help. And so, again, this goes to the bigger picture for all of us who are, I like to think, and I think most of the people I talk to like to think that we are rooted in logic and pragmatism as supposed to be the foundation of this show. Where do we go with that? So we're going to start arresting parents all over the country too, and we don't even put violent criminals in jail? 2 weeks ago, we talked about it on the show, 2 or 3 weeks ago, the New York police officer, Jonathan Diller, who was shot dead by a guy with 21 prior arrests, 9 of them felonies. And we're going to start putting parents in jail because they're bad parents or your kids are social outcasts. I don't know. I think it's worse than a slippery slope. And I think the other thing that as adults we have to consider, and I do too, we all own a piece of this, myself included. We all own a piece of this rapid decline and decay of our culture and decency because we've let it happen. And again, I include myself, so I'm not pointing a finger here, but we've let it happen. We all stood by while the entertainment, Hollywood, the movies and the things that our kids see, we all stood by while that got worse and worse and more graphic and more inhumane. We all stood by while social media platforms, Snapchat, TikTok, all of those openly solicited children for sex trafficking and child pornography. We all stood by, myself included, and either didn't say anything or didn't say enough. We all stood by while 20 years ago they started questioning, we need to take God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. Well, you don't have to be a Christian or God-fearing person. I'm not a big Bible thumper, but if you're so offended by the Pledge of Allegiance having the words, the phrase, and under God in it, there's something wrong with you, not the rest of us. So that all started decades ago. And I think, again, we acquiesce to it like we will likely acquiesce to the notion of leaving our car keys on the doorstep for carjackers because we don't want them to get hurt. We all own a piece of what's happening, and I think to take it out on these 2 parents who are, without argument, are poor parents who should not have children, probably shouldn't even own a pet. Self-absorbed, not that bright, let their kid get swallowed up in whatever he was getting swallowed up in and ignored all the warning signs. But I think, to be fair, you have to understand it's not that easy to get help for people like that. We have homeless people all over the country, in armies of them, hundreds of thousands of them, drug addicted. These people need help. They need love. They need compassion. They need a path forward. And, our answer to that now is going to be to start arresting the parents. I don't know. I find it to be a bad move, and I don't think it's fair to anybody, and I also don't think it solves the problem. It's not going to solve the problem. And to that point, one might add, and I will, well, if we weren't sharing our health care in classrooms with, illegal immigrants from all over the world who don't speak the language, have no interest in assimilating to our culture, and don't particularly care a whole lot for the country. I mean, so this is kind of an expected road that we're going down here. And on that note, I just quickly follow up. I mean, I have to mention, because it's all over the news and it's important, all these marches and protests going on now in Dearborn, Michigan, where people are chanting "Death to America, Death to America." And of course, the reaction of most people, including myself, is, you don't like it here, don't let the door hit you in the ass. But Dearborn, Michigan, it goes to what I've just been talking about, where it's been happening for decades. Anyone who follows the news knows that Dearborn, Michigan, even 15 or 20 years ago, was accepting and getting overrun with Muslims and Hindu religion. And again, this isn't a racist thing. Sure, there's a lot of those people that are good people. They're fine, and they came here to have a better life for them and their families and all of that. But what happened is, undeniably, it completely changed the culture of Dearborn, Michigan. So Dearborn, Michigan doesn't look like Dearborn, Michigan anymore. It looks like Tehran. And you have to wonder where this all leads. So people chanting "Death to America, Death to America." I'm not exactly sure what you do or where you go with that, but it can't be good. And so again, I think we're heading down a weird road here, and I've talked before about the inertia that's happening here. There are differing viewpoints. A young journalist, and I don't have his name with me, but he wrote a piece a few days ago on Substack, and it was called Vibe Shift. And he's a younger guy, and I think there is some validity to what he says, that he's sensing a vibe shift among mostly young people, African-American people, Hispanics, just generally a vibe shift about where this country's going, and maybe people reconsidering, like, okay, we're headed down a bad road here, and people are coming around to more traditional thinking, traditional norms, societal norms, and stuff like that. I'd like to believe that's true, but everything I see in my gut, and I've mentioned this before on the radio and on this show, that there's an inertia happening here. It's like the tilt-a-whirl, and you get the cart that spins the fastest. And as you get going, you're pressed to the back of the seat, and the centrifugal force, like, you can't pull yourself ahead. That's my concern for the country at large right now, is that we're getting caught up in a centrifugal force where we're going to get, slung to the edge of the pot like dry pasta here if we're not careful. And, at some point, you have to think at some point that there's no return. Or if there is a return, what does it look like? So that's kind of our stuff for this week. As always, I want to thank everybody for joining us. Feel free to comment. Please like, share, subscribe, do all that stuff as we try to grow the channel here. And please comment, because I'm always interested in what people think about the content. If you'd like more of this, more of that, please let me know. Think of it as a spaghetti sauce. A little more sugar, a little more salt, a touch of oregano. Keep the blue side up.